I was 26 when my younger sister Melanie got engaged, and from the moment she called to share the news, I knew exactly what kind of circus it was going to become. I don't say that with bitterness, okay, maybe a little, but mostly just clarity. Our family doesn't do normal. We do favoritism wrapped in passive-aggressive bows, guilt trips served with dessert, and behind-the-scenes manipulation like it's a cherished tradition. And Melanie? She was always the princess of the show, the golden child, the one who did everything right, according to my mom. Meanwhile, I was the black sheep, the one who never quite fit into the family's curated image of picture-perfect unity. My name's Callum, by the way, and if you ask anyone in my family, they'll tell you I've always had a flair for drama. To be fair, I work in marketing, corporate events, brand launches, high-end PR gigs. So yeah, I know how to craft a story, how to stage a moment, how to grab attention. But I never brought that into family life. Not really. Except maybe that one time I accidentally got more compliments than Melanie at her high school graduation party because I showed up with a girlfriend who looked like she walked off a Vogue cover. Big mistake. My mom didn't speak to me for 3 days. Melanie called me attention-starved. And ever since, it's like everything I do, every success, every milestone, is viewed through the lens of, is Callum trying to outshine his sister again? So when Melanie got engaged to this guy named Drew, a generic finance bro with 2 white teeth and a handshake that tried too hard, I congratulated her. I even offered to help with the planning. But from the jump, I could tell I wasn't part of the inner circle. She formed a wedding committee, a literal committee. Mom, Aunt Denise, her 2 bridesmaids, and her best friend Laura. I wasn't included, not even when they needed someone to help design the invitations or set up a website. That stung, I won't lie. Especially because I'd helped 3 of my friends get their wedding sites off the ground with 0 credit and no complaints. But here, I was told, more than once, just show up and don't make it about you. And so I did. Or at least I tried. Fast forward 9 months, and we're at the rehearsal dinner. A sleek, over-decorated Italian restaurant in a part of town where parking is a nightmare unless you pay for valet. It's packed with both sides of the family. Drew's parents in pastel cashmere, Melanie glowing in a white floral number, and our mom buzzing around like a pageant coach before the big show. I showed up 10 minutes early with a bottle of rare red wine as a gift and got a tight-lipped smile from Melanie and a distracted, "Oh, you're here," from Mom. Things were fine for the first half hour. I made small talk, tried to stay out of the way, even helped Grandpa Gerald figure out how to switch his phone camera from selfie mode back to normal. But I could feel the energy. That subtle hum of disapproval that always followed me around family events. Like they were waiting for me to pull a stunt. Like they didn't trust me to just be normal. I was chatting with my cousin Ava when I felt a firm hand clamp down on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was. Uncle Rick, my mom's older brother. The man who still bragged about his high school football days despite now walking with a slight limp and a beer belly. He always had this way of acting like he was the family's moral compass, even though he got kicked out of 2 of his kids' PTA meetings for heated language. He steered me away from the crowd, just outside the dining area, near a wall lined with framed black and white photos of the restaurant's glory days. "Callum," he said, voice low and serious, like we were about to talk national security. "You owe this family an apology." I blinked. "Excuse me." He leaned in slightly, his breath thick with red wine and that cologne he overused. "For always trying to steal the spotlight. For making everything about you. Your sister's big day is tomorrow, and if I catch even a whiff of one of your little stunts." "I haven't done anything," I said, jaw tightening. "You never have to," he snapped. "That's the problem. You walk in like you're some celebrity, and everyone starts whispering. You wear fancy clothes, you make the rest of us feel small, and now you're here, probably planning to upstage your sister again. Not this time." I stood there, stunned. There it was. The unspoken suspicion made audible. And the worst part? Uncle Rick wasn't even close to the wedding committee. He didn't know anything. He was just voicing what the rest of them probably thought in quieter corners. I could have argued. I could have tried to explain that I just wanted to support my sister, that I wasn't trying to make anything about me. But instead, I smiled. Calm, polite, the kind of smile that says, "This conversation is over." And I walked away. I didn't tell anyone what he said. Not Ava, not my dad, who mostly stays quiet at these things. Not even Melanie, though part of me wondered if she'd put him up to it. But something inside me shifted that moment. Like a wire snapping. Because if they were going to paint me as the villain no matter what I did, maybe I'd start leaning into it. The thing is, I wasn't just a black sheep. I was a very capable one. While they were rehearsing dinner speeches and trying to coordinate color-coded table settings, I'd been working quietly behind the scenes. Watching, planning, observing the gaps they never noticed. Like how they chose a venue that allowed outside sponsorships for events. Or how their budget didn't include certain lighting upgrades. Or how the projection system they planned to use for the slideshow had a last-minute vendor dropout. So I made a few calls. And when I arrived at the venue that evening, I didn't just walk in as Callum, misunderstood older brother. I walked in as someone who had bought out the room, paid off the lighting crew, renegotiated the contract, and rewired the evening, ever so slightly, in a way no one saw coming. Which brings us to 90 minutes later. Toasts were about to begin. Glasses clinked. The lights dimmed. Everyone turned to look at the screen. And up flashed the words, "Tonight's event proudly sponsored by the Black Sheep." I heard the confused murmurs before I stepped onto the small platform by the mic. And when I said, "Welcome, everyone," I swear the room stopped breathing. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't smug. I was calm, controlled. For once, I didn't feel like I was reacting to their expectations. I was directing the moment, and I saw it in their eyes, the realization that they'd underestimated me. Again, but I wasn't there to make a scene. Not yet. I had something else planned. Something more precise. And just as I reached for the mic to continue, Melanie stood up from her table. Her face was unreadable. Her fiancé was whispering something to her, clearly trying to get her to sit back down. But she didn't. She started walking toward me. She walked slowly, like she was measuring each step, like every inch closer to me gave her time to figure out what she was going to say. The room wasn't dead silent anymore. There were little coughs, glass clinks, confused whispers, but it felt silent to me. All I could hear was the echo of her heels on the wooden floor. I kept my hand on the mic stand, not speaking, not moving, just watching my little sister approach me like I'd just lit a fuse at her wedding rehearsal dinner. When she finally got to me, she didn't even glance at the screen behind us. Her voice was low, just loud enough for me to hear. "What is this?" I tilted my head slightly, like I was surprised by the question. "A welcome message. I thought I'd do a little introduction before the toasts. Make it memorable." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not supposed to be speaking." "Oh, I know. I wasn't invited to speak. But you didn't exactly invite me to anything else either, did you?" "Don't do this now," she whispered, her jaw tight. "I'm not doing anything. I just wanted to welcome everyone. Isn't that what families do?" She took a breath like she was about to explode, then exhaled it through her nose like a kettle just holding back steam. Her eyes flicked to the audience. Mom, Drew, the bridal party, Uncle Rick sitting with his arms crossed like a bouncer at a nightclub, and then she leaned in, her voice just above a hiss. "You always make it about you. Every time. Every single time." I met her gaze and said softly, "Maybe that's because no one else ever makes it about me." She stared at me, as if searching my face for a sign that I was bluffing, that this was some long-planned prank, that I was still that annoying older brother who couldn't stand not being the center of attention. But I wasn't smiling. Not even inside. She turned away without another word and marched back to her seat. I didn't even finish the speech. I let the silence fill the space for just a second too long, long enough to make it feel intentional, then handed the mic to the MC like that had been my only job. The lights came back up. A few polite laughs were tossed around like lifeboats, trying to save the sinking mood. The first bridesmaid got up to give her toast, and the evening trudged forward. But the damage had already been done. Later that night, I lingered by the exit while people slowly filed out. Some nodded at me like they didn't know what to say. A few smiled in that tight-lipped, Midwestern way that means, that was something. And a couple avoided me altogether. The last person out was my mother. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't even look at me. I went home and didn't sleep. Because what hurt the most wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't the silent judgment. It was the realization that no one, not one person, had come up to me and said, "Hey, are you okay?" No one had wondered why I felt like I had to buy the room just to get a moment to speak. They just assumed I was being me, the problem child, the narcissist, the drama magnet. The truth? I had spent years burying slights like bones. Little moments. Words that weren't meant to hurt, but did. Invitations that never came. Jokes that cut deeper than they should have. And most of the time, I let it slide. I played the role. I laughed it off. I stayed out of the way. But that night, something cracked. And once you hear the snap, it's hard to unhear it. The morning of the wedding, I debated not going. I knew I wasn't needed. I'd already been told I wasn't walking anyone down the aisle. I wasn't in the bridal party. I didn't even have a table assignment. I had to ask the venue staff the night before. But not showing up would just confirm everything they already believed about me. So I went. I showed up in a black tailored suit, early, quiet, polished, and invisible. Melanie didn't speak to me when she passed with her bridesmaids, though she gave the photographer 3 separate versions of her candid smile. Drew nodded at me once like we were casual co-workers in a break room. Uncle Rick gave me a smug look like he'd warned everyone, and I'd proven him right. Then the ceremony started. I'll admit it was beautiful. The flowers, the music, the soft breeze rustling through the trees behind the altar. It was one of those weddings that would look amazing in photos for years to come. And yet, sitting there in the second-to-last row, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really there. Like I was just some footnote in the background of someone else's perfect memory. The reception was worse. Everyone had assigned seats. Mine was at a side table near the DJ, next to a cousin I barely knew and a groomsman who was already halfway drunk. No place card, just a hand-scrawled name on a folded napkin. I glanced around and saw the real family table. My mom, my aunts, my cousins, all huddled like a royal court. I wasn't even part of the dinner conversation. I was just decoration. And then it happened. The slideshow. During dessert, they dimmed the lights again, this time on purpose, and a soft piano track started playing. The screen lit up with baby pictures, awkward childhood shots, Melanie's prom, Melanie's graduation, Melanie with Drew at a beach in Greece. And then, the photos of family. Our family. And you know what I noticed? I wasn't in any of them. Not a single one. Not even the group shots. They'd been cropped. Or maybe just chosen without me. I sat there, fork frozen in midair, watching as my own family's history rewrote itself without me in it. I looked around, wondering if anyone else had noticed. Wondering if someone would lean over and whisper, "Wait, where's Callum?" But no one did. Because they didn't notice. Or maybe they didn't care. That was the moment. That was the breaking point. Not the passive-aggressive comments. Not the cold shoulders or snide remarks. But that, watching years of my life erased like I'd never existed in the first place. When the lights came back on, I quietly stood and walked out. No one stopped me. I drove aimlessly for a while. Just needing air. Needing distance. I ended up in an empty parking lot outside a closed bookstore, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And all I could think was, why did I let it get this far? Why had I spent years letting them rewrite the story of who I was? Why did I keep showing up for people who never showed up for me? That night, I made a decision. Not an emotional, heat-of-the-moment one, but a quiet, methodical decision. If they were going to treat me like a background character, I'd show them what happens when the background takes over the scene. I started making phone calls the next morning. And as I began putting my plan in motion, connecting dots, calling in favors, reviewing contracts, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt clear. Crystal clear. They wanted a perfect wedding. They'd get it. But they'd also get a lesson they'd never forget. And it all started with one final guest list they didn't know existed. One with my name at the top. I didn't go home after the wedding. I packed a bag, left a note for my apartment sitter, and boarded a one-way flight to Vancouver. I told no one. Not even Dad. He'd texted me a simple, "Where'd you go?" after I slipped out of the reception, but when I didn't reply, he didn't follow up. That was his thing. He never pushed. Never asked. Never got involved. I used to admire it as stoic neutrality, but now I saw it for what it really was, quiet detachment disguised as peacekeeping. So I disappeared for a while. I got off the grid. The first 2 days in Vancouver were a blur. I stayed in a cheap Airbnb above a bakery that opened at 4 a.m., which meant the smell of warm bread crept through the floorboards before sunrise. I walked through Stanley Park in the rain. I watched ferries come and go without ever boarding one. I didn't take pictures. I didn't check social media. I just let myself be. No expectations, no performance, no need to explain anything to anyone. But on the third day, something shifted. It started with a voicemail. It was from my mother. Her voice was clipped, polite, rehearsed. "Callum, I think what you did at the rehearsal dinner was, frankly, in very poor taste. Melanie was very upset. Your behavior was disruptive and hurtful and, well, I hope you take some time to reflect on that. Anyway, let us know when you're back. I played it twice, then deleted it. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. That was the scary part, realizing I'd finally stopped expecting more. That little ember inside me that always wanted her approval, it had quietly died sometime between the slideshow and my silent exit. I didn't even mourn it. I started running in the mornings. Not far, just along the waterfront, long enough to feel the wind slice through my chest and remind me I was still here. I stopped checking my phone. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since high school. I wrote about every little detail. How the barista at the corner cafe remembered my order, how a woman with gray hair and a sharp laugh fed birds near the ferry dock every morning. I wrote about my childhood, about Melanie, about Uncle Rick, about how it felt to be erased from your own family's memories. And then, one morning, I wrote about what came next. Because that ember wasn't dead, it had just changed shape. And deep down, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, I got a call from Leah. She was an old friend from college who now worked at a boutique marketing firm in Seattle. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I'd left a voicemail before I left town. Half a confession, half a request. I told her I was done chasing approval from people who would never give it, and I wanted to build something real, something mine. You still serious about starting your own agency? She asked. More than ever. Well, she said, come to Seattle. So I did. And just like that, the second half of my life began. The first few months were rough. I slept on a pull-out couch in Leah's guest room. I worked out of coffee shops with spotty Wi-Fi. I had no clients, no pitch deck, and no website. But I had fire. And for the first time in years, I wasn't working to impress anyone. I was building for myself. We called it Northbound, a creative agency for underdog brands with something to prove. The mission was simple: help people tell stories that no one had bothered to hear before. Startups with a niche, nonprofits with edge, small businesses too quirky for the big leagues. We launched our first campaign 3 weeks later for a local vegan bakery with zero marketing budget and the best pumpkin scones I've ever tasted. We made a viral TikTok campaign using only customer testimonials and behind-the-scenes footage. It blew up. They went from 30 orders a day to 200. They had to hire 3 more people just to keep up. After that, things snowballed. By month 4, we had 3 regular clients and our own co-working space. By month 6, we had a proper office and a waiting list. By the end of the year, Northbound was profitable. Not just barely scraping by, profitable, thriving. I paid Leah back in full, gave her equity in the company, and moved into a loft with exposed brick and too many plants. And I still hadn't spoken to anyone in my family. No one reached out. No one apologized. No one asked how I was doing. That was fine. I didn't need them anymore. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten. I started seeing a therapist, which wasn't something I ever thought I'd say. Her name was Clara, and she had this calm, no-nonsense energy that reminded me of a stern librarian who secretly wrote poetry. The first thing she said after I dumped the whole story on her in a rush of words was, "That sounds like a death by 1,000 cuts." That stuck with me, because she was right. It wasn't one moment. It was all the moments. The small humiliations, the casual exclusions, the polite little digs disguised as jokes. I'd been bleeding quietly for years, thinking maybe if I was just more successful, more generous, more accommodating, they'd see me. But they didn't want to see me. They wanted me quiet, convenient, background noise. So I stopped bleeding, and I started building armor. Not the kind that keeps you isolated, but the kind that protects what's real. The kind that lets you move through life without mistaking other people's expectations for your own reflection. I wish I could say I was totally healed by then, but healing isn't linear. Sometimes I'd see a family photo pop up on a cousin's Instagram. Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas brunch, and it'd hit me. That sting, that hollow ache of being left out. But it passed faster every time. And then, something unexpected happened. It was spring, nearly a year after Melanie's wedding, and I got a call from Dad. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. "Hey," he said. His voice was hesitant, like he wasn't sure I'd answer. "Hey," I replied, equally cautious. I wanted to let you know your grandmother passed away." I closed my eyes. Grandma June, the one person in our family who never played favorites, who mailed me a birthday card every year with a crisp $20 bill and a note that always said the same thing. "You're one of a kind, kid. Don't let them dim your shine." I sat down. Was it sudden? She was 93, he said, with a soft laugh. Not exactly, but yeah. We talked for a few more minutes. He told me there would be a small memorial at her church, that Melanie would be giving a eulogy, that the whole family would be there. He paused, then said, "You don't have to come if you don't want to." But I did want to. Not for them. For her. So I booked a flight. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I showed up at the church in a charcoal suit and a navy tie, Grandma's favorite colors. I sat in the back pew. No one noticed me at first. Everyone was too busy crying, hugging, whispering. The place smelled like lilies and old wood and grief. Melanie got up to speak. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her voice cracked halfway through her speech. She talked about Grandma's lemon cookies and her giant costume jewelry collection and how she always rooted for the underdog. I wondered if she realized who the real underdog had been. When the service ended, I slipped out before anyone saw me. Or so I thought. I was halfway down the church steps when I heard a voice behind me. "Callum." I turned. Melanie. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, face pale, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. "You came," she said. I didn't answer. She took a step forward. "I wasn't sure if you would." I wasn't sure either. We stood there in silence. It wasn't awkward. Just unfinished. "I saw your name in that campaign last month," she said. "The bakery thing? That was you, right?" I nodded. "You're doing well." "I am." Another pause. She looked down at the ground. "I think I owe you an apology." "Which part?" I asked, not to be snarky, but because there were too many parts to list. "All of it," she whispered. And then, before I could say anything, a car honked at the curb. Drew was waving from the driver's seat. Melanie glanced back, then looked at me one last time. "I'm glad you came." She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She just left. And I stood there on the church steps, staring at the back of her head as she walked away. It wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was something. A crack in the ice. I flew back to Seattle that night with something heavier than luggage. Something like a decision forming. Because I wasn't just successful now. I was ready. Ready to speak. Ready to rewrite the story they thought they knew. Ready to remind them who they left behind, and what he became without them. And it all started with one final event. A gathering they'd never forget. One that I would host myself, as the guest of honor. And just like that, the invitation list began. It started with a logo. A clean, sharp design. A single black sheep stitched into the corner of a crest. Elegant, subtle, undeniable. I sent it to my graphic designer with a short message. "Make it look expensive." Within 48 hours, I had it embroidered on linen, engraved in matte silver, stamped onto thick, jet black cardstock. I didn't tell him what it was for. I told no one. Because this time, it wasn't just about attention. It was about clarity. It was about writing my name into the narrative they tried to delete me from. It was about precision. For the first time in my life, I wasn't improvising. I was building something with the patience of a sculptor. No more reactive swipes. No more desperate attempts to be seen. This time, I would make sure they saw me, not as a footnote, not as a disruption, but as the force that rewrote the room. The planning took months. But first, I had to wait for the opportunity. And it came exactly 3 weeks later in the form of a call from Aunt Denise, of all people. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting when her name popped up on my screen. I stared at it like it was a ghost. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to it that evening, I had to sit down. "Hi Callum, it's Denise. Listen, we're planning a surprise anniversary party for your parents. 35 years next month. And, well, we really want it to be a family thing. Everyone pitching in. It would mean a lot if you could help, maybe even host. I know things have been tense, but this could be a nice way to reconnect." I laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Just amazed. Now they wanted me involved? Now they wanted me to host? I played it again, just to be sure I heard it right. And then, I started taking notes. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. They'd built a stage. All I had to do now was own it. I called her back the next morning with the kind of warm, gracious tone you'd expect from someone who wasn't about to turn their family's neat little memory lane event into something much bigger. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to." She was thrilled. I could hear it in her voice. The relief, the satisfaction of checking off the hardest name on the list. She started rambling about catering options, guest lists, invitation templates. I let her talk. When she asked if I had any ideas, I said, "I'll handle everything." There was a pause. "Everything. You called the right person. Leave it to me." I gave her a rough date, said I'd confirm the venue, and hung up. Then I got to work. First, the location. It couldn't be a hotel ballroom or some rustic barn venue with string lights and mason jars. No, I needed something elegant but intimate, professional but warm, a place that could host a night of celebration and transformation. I rented out the Lattice. It was a private event space perched on the edge of a rooftop garden downtown. Industrial ceilings, panoramic views of the skyline, and a full multimedia setup built for brand launches and investor showcases. I'd thrown 2 product events there the previous year, so the manager knew me, gave me a discount, threw in a couple extra upgrades. Corporate or personal? She asked as we finalized the deposit. Personal, I said, but with a message. Next, the guest list. I didn't alter it. I didn't need to. Aunt Denise had sent me a spreadsheet of all the invitees, over 60 people. Everyone from our family tree, plus my parents' oldest friends, a few business partners, and, of course, Melanie and Drew. I cross-checked the names, made sure the seating arrangements were unchanged. Let them keep their little kingdoms. Rick at the front, Melanie at center, Mom in the spotlight. That was fine. Let them feel comfortable. Let them feel like they were running the show. I even sent out custom invitations on that thick black cardstock with the elegant sheep insignia in the corner. You are cordially invited to a celebration of legacy, loyalty, and the ties that bind. That was the tagline I chose. Nobody questioned it. Nobody ever really reads the fine print. The decor? Minimalist. Black and white with accents of silver. Candlelight. Velvet napkins. Gold-accented flatware. I hired a lighting team to make sure the room would shift in mood depending on the moment. Soft warmth for dinner, theatrical spotlighting for speeches, and a custom projection setup for the surprise presentation. The presentation. That was the heart of the entire plan. It started with a folder on my desktop titled Sheep's Archive. Inside, I began to drop files. Clips. Screenshots. Photos. I spent hours scrolling back through family group chats. I found the ones where I was conveniently left out of vacations, birthdays, Sunday brunches. I dug up old photos from events where I was cropped or omitted. I found the wedding slideshow from Melanie's wedding. Yes, the very one that deleted me, and laid it side by side with the original files I had saved on an old drive. I started editing. Side by side. Frame by frame. The erasure. The lies of omission. Then I added my own footage. Photos from Northbound. Video testimonials from clients. Campaign reels. Newspaper clippings. Awards. Team celebrations. Birthday parties thrown by friends who chose me instead of being forced by blood. Each piece stitched together like a silent, undeniable confession. Here's the life you never asked about. The one you ignored. The one that grew without you. But I didn't want it to be bitter. That was too easy. So I threaded it with something deeper. Moments of me as a child, the ones they forgot. A video of me dancing with Grandma June at a cookout. A blurry photo of me and Melanie playing on the lawn before the split. The fragments of a time when I wasn't the black sheep. When I was just Callum. Just a boy in a family that hadn't yet decided who he needed to be. The final slide? A message in silver serif text, fading slowly across the screen. Some of us bloom in silence. Some of us don't need the spotlight to shine. But tonight, you'll see me. 2 weeks before the event, I flew back to my hometown. Aunt Denise asked to meet for coffee to finalize some logistics. She looked me up and down when I arrived. Sleek coat, leather briefcase, freshly cut hair. I could feel the way she tried to figure out if I was successful or just pretending to be. How's work? She asked casually, sipping her vanilla latte. Busy, I said, but this event's a good break. She smiled, pleased with herself. I'm so glad we could bring you back into the fold. I almost laughed. As if they'd invited me. No, they'd summoned me, mistakenly believing I'd play my part this time. I nodded, thanked her for the opportunity, and handed her a mock-up of the event itinerary. It was clean, elegant, predictable. Dinner, speeches, slideshow, toast. She skimmed it, then said, "Looks perfect. I'll tell your mother." When I got back to my rental, I added one more line at the end of the real itinerary. Final segment, legacy statement, presented by Callum. Back in Seattle, I looped in my team. Just Leah and Jonas, my creative lead. I gave them a tight, NDA-protected brief. Coordinate the text setup, time the projection, prep the cue lighting. Leah caught on fast. "This is revenge," she said one night while reviewing the draft with me. I didn't deny it. But not petty. Not messy. It's like poetic revenge. Exactly. You sure they won't see it coming? They've never seen me clearly, I said. Why start now? She nodded. Then, with a small grin, do you want us in the room? I looked at her and smiled. You're not guests. You're crew. 1 week before the event, I called my dad. I don't know why exactly. Maybe part of me hoped he'd ask this time. Ask what happened at the wedding. Ask how I'd been. Ask something real. Instead, he answered with his usual monotone. Hey, son. I told him I was hosting the party. Oh, he said. That's generous of you. There was a pause. Then, your mother will be happy. Of course she would. He didn't ask anything else. I ended the call and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I sent the final confirmation to the caterers and wrote the closing lines of my presentation. 3 days before the event, I sent out a reminder email. Formal attire. Doors open at 6 o'clock sharp. Dinner at 6:45. Presentation at 8 o'clock. No one asked about the presentation. They never thought to. Why would they? To them, I was still the misfit with a flair for drama. They didn't know what I'd become. They didn't know I'd turned silence into fuel. They didn't know I was about to walk them into a room I'd designed from the ground up, not to destroy them, but to reveal them, not to burn bridges, but to finally, fully, walk across one, under my own name, under my own light. The black sheep in full bloom. And they were all coming, every single one of them, unaware that the next time they saw me, I'd be standing center stage, backlit, grounded, unflinching, telling the story they tried so hard to erase. The evening of the party, the city shimmered. It had just rained, one of those light, early spring drizzles that left everything glossy and cinematic. The skyline glowed against the clouds. Reflections danced on the sidewalk as guests arrived one by one, their heels tapping and suits pressed, umbrellas folding neatly at the lattice's front desk. The doorman, instructed to greet everyone warmly and offer champagne upon arrival, welcomed them into the rooftop atrium with a quiet elegance that said, "This is more than a party." I arrived early, dressed in a tailored 3-piece charcoal suit with a subtle sheen, formal but not ostentatious. The crest of the black sheep, stitched into my cufflinks, was barely noticeable. That was the point. Understatement. Precision. The venue looked flawless. Candles flickered inside glass domes. The seating was exact, family to the right, friends to the left, business acquaintances scattered organically throughout. On every table sat a small, silver-embossed menu folder with the phrase, "In celebration of 35 years of legacy and love." Music played gently from the grand piano in the corner. My team, Leah, Jonas, and 2 on-site staffers, moved like ghosts through the space, managing timing, lighting cues, and AV setups from the control booth discreetly tucked behind the main dining room. To the naked eye, they were just part of the service crew. At 6:30 sharp, the guests were seated. My mother arrived last, in a lavender gown, her silver clutch gripped tightly. My father trailed behind her, wearing a faint smile and his best navy blazer. They looked proud, regal even, the hosts of their own legacy, unaware that someone else had quietly rewritten the script. Dinner went smoothly. Toasts began at 7:30. Melanie was first. She stood at the mic, beaming, her arm looped around Drew's, and spoke about how their parents taught them what real love looks like. Her speech was rehearsed, safe, and full of sanitized nostalgia. People clapped politely. A few sniffled. Then Uncle Rick took the mic. He grinned like a politician, thanked everyone for coming, and made 3 dad jokes in a row. When he raised his glass and called my parents pillars of strength and grace, I noticed Mom tear up a little. Dad gave one of his standard nods, the one that looked like he was either deeply moved or holding in a sneeze. Hard to tell. At 8 o'clock sharp, the lights shifted. Warm tones softened to a cool dusk blue. The piano music faded. The projector screen lowered silently from the ceiling, and the room stilled. I stepped forward. "Before we move into dessert," I said calmly, "I've prepared something. A small tribute. A reflection. Something personal." I saw heads turn. A few confused glances. A few knowing smirks. Melanie shifted in her seat, suddenly alert. Uncle Rick narrowed his eyes. But no one spoke. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screen came alive. It began the way they expected. Clips of my parents in their early years, photos of their wedding, footage of family vacations. The kind of material people expect to see at events like these. It was smooth, nostalgic, disarming. Then the tempo changed. A fade. A brief silence. Then, a photo of our entire family at a 2009 reunion. Only this time, two versions were shown, side by side. One included me. One didn't. The room tensed. The slideshow continued, now split screen. One side, family photos as posted to Facebook, curated and cropped. The other, the original versions, unedited, complete. Again and again, my presence flickered in and out. My image erased. My hand cut from the edge of a frame. My name absent from a list of birthdays. One slide, in particular, hit like a punch, Melanie's wedding album. On the left, the official slideshow. On the right, a scan of the original guest list, with my name scratched out. Gasps echoed. Whispers. Fidgeting. Someone dropped a fork. I didn't rush it. The next segment moved into footage from my life. Clips from the bakery campaign, Northbound's office launch, our viral nonprofit project, award ceremonies, national press coverage. Then, a stitched-together sequence of people, clients, friends, mentors, talking to the camera. Callum changed our entire trajectory. We were invisible until he told our story. He believed in us when no one else did. Their words hung in the air like a verdict. Then the screen faded to black, and a single line appeared in white text. Sometimes the black sheep is just the only one who saw things clearly. I let the silence breathe. Then I stepped to the mic. I was told once, at a family dinner, no less, that I owed this family an apology for always stealing the spotlight. That I made things about me. That I was disruptive. I glanced toward Uncle Rick, who was now rigid in his seat. I used to believe that. I thought maybe if I tried hard enough, stayed quiet enough, made myself small enough, I'd earn a place. I stopped trying to stand out. I started trying to blend in. I scanned the room. My mother was pale. My father looked frozen. Melanie's lips were pressed into a thin line. But the truth is, I was never asking to be the center. I was just asking to exist. To be seen. To be remembered. I clicked the remote one last time. The final slide appeared. A photo of me and Grandma June. She was holding a cookie in one hand, her other wrapped around my shoulder. We were both laughing. Beneath it, a quote. Don't let them dim your shine. I closed the presentation. Then I looked at my parents, directly, calmly. You raised a son who learned how to shine without a stage. But tonight, I wanted you to see what you missed. I walked away from the mic. The lights returned to normal. But nothing felt normal. Silence. Heavy. Real. The pianist didn't start playing again. The servers didn't move. For a few seconds, no one even breathed. Then Leah cued the staff. Desserts were served. But the room was fractured. I didn't eat. I simply returned to my seat, took a sip of champagne, and let the night unfold. Mom didn't approach me. Dad looked over twice, but said nothing. Uncle Rick left early. Melanie came to me last. She stood behind my chair, cleared her throat, and said, You planned this whole thing just to embarrass us? I turned slowly. No, I planned this to correct the record. Her jaw flexed. You humiliated Mom. She humiliated me for 26 years. This was restraint. She stared at me, searching for the boy she once bossed around. But I wasn't there anymore. Good night, Melanie. I didn't give her more. I stood and left. Outside, the air was cool and clean. My ride was waiting. The door closed behind me like the final page of a book. In the days that followed, the fallout was deliciously quiet. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Then she sent a carefully worded email. We saw your presentation. We didn't realize how you felt. We hope you're doing well. No apology. Just optics. I didn't respond. Uncle Rick blocked me on Facebook. No loss there. Melanie posted a vague story about selfish people hijacking family events for personal therapy. And within 12 hours, her comment section was flooded with people asking if she was okay, followed by a few calling her out for hypocrisy. As for Dad, he called. 3 weeks after the party. Hey, he said. Hey, I answered. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you were right. That was it. Not a speech. Not a breakthrough. But enough. Northbound tripled in size that year. We opened an office in Toronto. Leah became partner. Jonas got his first team under him. I traveled, spoke at panels, started mentoring others who knew what it meant to be overlooked. And my name? It carried weight. Not because I demanded attention, but because I owned my story. Fully. Finally. And from that night on, They never forgot me again. Because when the black sheep finds his voice, he doesn't just join the flock. He leads it.